Alright, so we're going to begin this evening. We're going to do Parashat Nitzavim Vayelech. As I mentioned last week, we want to catch up because on Tuesdays and Wednesdays we have the holidays, so we want to catch up on the Parasha. This is towards the end of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, pretty much the last day of his life. And what would you think somebody would do on his last day? Imagine he knew this is the last day and he's healthy, he's able to communicate. What would he tell his family, his children? You know, I have this bank account, I have this piece of real estate to take care of. A lot of people would think about their possessions, what to do with them after they leave this world. Moshe, of course, does not speak about his possessions. Money is definitely not on his mind. What does he think about? What's on his mind? So he says like this, don't forget, I've shown you that there are two paths, the path of life and the path of death. And I tell you that what you have ahead of you could also be a beracha or a kilala. It could either be a blessing or a curse. It's up to you what kind of life you choose. I recommend, he says, uvacharta b'chaim, choose life. Now, if you just read it literally, you say to yourself, well, of course, nobody wants to die. But what he's talking about is a spiritual type of life. What people consider life today is really existence. They exist, they eat, they sleep, they work. That's not called living, according to the Torah. That's called existing. He says you want to live, you want to be connected to God. And what is that life all about? The spiritual life, le'avai Hashem Elokecha, to love your God, lishmoa bekolo, to listen to His voice, to listen to His word, uledavko bo, and to attach yourself, to connect yourself to Him, to abide by His laws. If you live your life by these laws, then you are living. This is the real life. Obviously, this makes a big difference, whether one follows the Torah mitzvot or not. It is enough for a Jew to look back at history to see what happened when he did not follow the Torah mitzvot. Today we're able to look back. If we examine our history properly, we can see the difference of what happened to the Jewish people when they were living according to the Torah and what happened when they did not. So it's not just about life and death. It's about, are we connected to Hashem or not? In which way will we be the most successful and gain the most? So in order to understand what gain is and what success is, one has to be introduced to spiritual gains, spiritual benefits. Otherwise, when we think of gains and benefits, we're thinking about financial gain, physical benefits. It is important, therefore, to compare. So when he says Chaim ve'mavet, life and death, that's what he's talking about. Is it existence, or is it really living a life that has substance, a life that has meaning and purpose? That is the ultimate life. So in order to focus on this, in order to remind ourselves of this, he says, amongst other things, Kitvu lachem et hashira azot. Write down this song. That's what the word shira means. And he's referring to Azinu. Azinu is a very, very powerful parasha. It contains many valuable lessons. If one focuses on what Azinu says, he can know a lot about the Jewish destiny. However, the same words, Kitvu lachem et hashira azot, also refers to the Torah. Write yourself a Sefer Torah. Have this Sefer Torah close to you. Live by it. You want to know how to live? Live by this Sefer Torah. Therefore, write it for yourself so that you always have one next to you. The Torah makes a promise too. This Torah that we're telling you to study, that Hashem is telling you, remember it. Lo tishachach mipi zaro. It will never be forgotten from the Jewish people. There will always be those that will learn the Torah and teach the Torah. So that's a very important promise. Because many things will happen in the future that will try to take you away from the Torah, that will try to cool you off. All kinds of forces out there. There will always be a certain percentage of individuals who will be closely connected to the Torah. What can go wrong? So Moshe Rabbeinu predicts the future. He says, the reason I'm giving you this long speech about the importance of Torah is ki yadati et yitzrecha. I know all about your evil inclination, et meryecha, your rebelliousness. Ve'af ki achrei moti, and I even know what you're going to do after I leave this world. I know that you're going to continue to misbehave, to do things of the nature of what you've done through the 40 years journey in the desert. We've already seen an example of how you will act under different kinds of circumstances. So Moshe Rabbeinu already has an idea of what's going to be, and therefore he needs to warn us. Be careful, because many of these challenges are going to come back. How are you going to deal with them? I know some of you will not deal with them properly. So because of this, he makes sure to remind us that this Torah mechayev et kulam. This applies to all generations to come, not just to those who are alive now, to those who are present now. Basically, the ones who attested to this, that this is true, they committed for themselves and for future generations to live their life by this Torah. So no one can in the future claim, this doesn't apply to me. My father was okay with it. He was interested. I'm not. You cannot say that. You cannot convert to another religion. And if he does, then he will be responsible for his actions. We're basically part of this. We've signed to this. And if one does not live by it, then he is accountable. So that's why Moshe Rabbeinu says this applies to Asher enenu po imanu hayom as well. Those who are not alive today, who are yet to be born. All of this will apply to them too. You can't run away from this. However, Moshe Rabbeinu is aware that things will be very, very tough. Many times the Jew will not be in his country, and even if he is in his country, things will not always be the way they should be. But there's a big focus on Acharit HaYamim, on the end of days, because that's when Moshe Rabbeinu sees that a large percentage of Jews will be distant from their roots. They will not even know what Judaism is all about. Many of them perhaps will not even know that they're Jewish. So there's a focus on them. What will be of them in the end of days? So he says like this, Hashem will be very upset at the fact that the Jewish people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And at one point he says, Anochi haster astir, I will conceal, I will hide my face. Wow, that is a very, very serious punishment. It doesn't mean that Hashem removes himself from the scene. He's still there, watching over us, but it will not be as apparent. Miracles will not be as clear. It will appear like he's not there. People will ask, where is God? Is there a God? How could he let these things happen? That's what Hester Astir means. He will conceal himself, which will make it in some ways more difficult for the Jew to see the truth of the Ashgacha, of the divine providence. And the question is, well, wait a minute, if that's the case, then things are going to only get worse, aren't they? If he conceals himself. But ultimately Hashem is all about chesed. Everything is kindness. Even when he conceals himself, what is the message of that concealment? I want you to search for me. There was part of the teshuvah, part of repentance, when Jews have become so distant, is, okay, now it's up to you to search for me. I will help you, but you have to initiate. You have to show that you care. So we're going to talk a little bit about those who initiate it on their own, and those that Hashem has to awaken them. In this stage of Aster Astir, when Hashem conceals himself, it's very, very dark. And it's very, very difficult to see the truth. And Hashem says, yes, at this point, this is when I want to see you coming to me. At the darkest stage in history, when things are very, very dark. One way of understanding this is with the cute story. I think it was the granddaughter of Rabbi Baruch Mimeshbush. She came crying to her grandfather. Why are you crying? She says, me and my friends were playing hide and seek. You know about the game hide and seek? And I went looking for them. And now it was their turn for me to hide and for them to look for me. But they're not looking for me. So the rabbi, the grandfather says, that's exactly what Hashem is asking. Why isn't everybody looking for me? In other words, that's what they should be doing. That is what is expected of them. And there will come a time that they will. Moshe Rabbeinu, however, is concerned not about those who eventually will find Hashem. He's concerned about the dropouts. I would rather not use this word, but that's the only word that comes to mind. For individuals who may have been religious at one point and who left. And unfortunately there are too many of such individuals for all kinds of reasons. Leave religion. And when I say all kinds of religion, it could be even a broken home, not getting enough attention at home. It's not their fault. All kinds of reasons why people become very, very weak in their attachment to Torah mitzvot. But the one that Moshe is the most concerned about, he calls a shoresh poreh rosh v'la'ana. Very, very difficult words to understand. But basically, it's a bitter root of hemlock. If you look for an English translation, that's pretty much what it is. A bitter root. Why is somebody being described as a bitter root? Obviously, this individual has some issues, some serious issues that relate more to his character than to the circumstances. That's why he's more dangerous. Dangerous to himself, dangerous to others too. Well, the words bitter tell you maybe he's bitter. There's a certain bitterness to him. But we're talking about a root. We're talking about something that is hard, something that is stubborn. There are certain characteristics that are not a good mix for someone to have. And if he does have them, they could lead him astray. Bitterness, complaining, unhappy about something, stubborn. And at a later stage, vidbarech bilvavo, he will be very arrogant and think highly of himself, that everything will be okay, you'll see nothing will happen to me, I'm going to do this and that, which is wrong, and nothing will happen to me. He's mistaken. He doesn't even realize it. He apparently hasn't studied Jewish history. But how does he get to that? How does he get to have such an attitude? It actually begins as a root, a speck, something small that eventually spreads, just like cancer. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. If you don't catch it on time, it spreads and it can kill you. So this bitterness, this stubbornness, has a certain element of arrogance at a certain stage, which basically convinces him, I can get along just fine without God's help, God forbid. I can do fine, you'll see. I can prove it to you. Who needs religion? So his whole mindset is misleading him. This type of mindset, this attitude, this character is completely misleading him to think he's right and everybody else is wrong. Imagine somebody telling 1,000 people you're wrong and I'm right. Do you have any proof? No, there's no real proof. On the contrary, we have the proof. We have the Torah. We have the testimony. If you were to study the Torah, study our history, study what all the prophets and all the sages and all the great rabbis, what they said, you will see that they must have known what they're talking about. They didn't just make it up. It's not just fairy tales. They didn't lie. So where are you coming from that you have this overconfidence? There's something in the character. So Moshe Rabbeinu turns to all the generations in the future and reminds them as follows. Listen, attain Nitzavim hayom. You're standing today. Well, standing is a very interesting word to use. Now, of course, they weren't sitting down, but why use the word standing? So the commentaries do tell us that it's not a coincidence. This parasha is read right before Rosh Hashanah. You're standing before Hashem. You're about to go and give an account for what you've done throughout the year. It's the day of judgment. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Adin. So you're standing before Hashem. But another idea behind the words attain Nitzavim, Moshe is reminding Jewish people in the future, just look at yourself. Many, many years removed from Matan Torah, from the giving of Torah, you are still alive. Attain Nitzavim. Am Yisrael Chai v'Kayam, you're alive. Many nations have ceased to exist. They're long gone. Isn't this an indicator that Hashem loves you? Despite all the persecutions, despite all the trouble, everything that you went through. Attain Nitzavim. Just take a look at this fact. This is where you should start investigating what Judaism is all about. It's all about our history. Start with this fact. The Jewish people, Nitzavim, Hayom, they're still alive today. Moshe Rabbeinu continues on to say, and you know what? All of you, regardless of how learned you are or not, makes no difference because you all have potential. You're all part of the nation, you all have potential. And he lists all kinds of individuals, from the big to the small, and he includes even the sho'ev meimecha, the one who draws water from the well for you. You know, it's a very, very low job. It makes no difference who you are. If you are part of this nation, you have tremendous potential. You could become great. Why tell us this? Moshe Rabbeinu uses a lot of encouragement to remind even those who may have drifted, those who may never have had a chance to learn about their Judaism because they weren't sent to a Jewish school. He therefore turns to anyone, especially in the future, that may think that they don't have a chance, that they're so far removed. No. You're alive. Pay close attention to this. You have great potential. And even though you may be distant, you can always return. But it's not only about return, it's even about those who are observant already or who are religious. They can all attain great heights. There's a very important book called Tanat V'Elyahu. Our tradition is that this was dictated by Eliyahu the prophet. There he says something incredible. Nishba'ani, I swear to you, ben ish ben isha ben eved ben shivcha ben goy ben yehudi akol lefi ma'asav ruach hakodesh ora alav. I swear to you, regardless of the individual, man or woman, slave or free man, Jew or non-Jew, regardless, depending on your deeds, you could attain the level of Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration. You know what Ruach HaKodesh means? It's just like, pretty much, almost like prophecy. Regardless of who you are, depending on your deeds, if you're a good person or not, you can attain that level. So he's speaking to everyone, regardless who they are, where you come from. You have great potential. The human being is capable of reaching great heights. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu goes on to say, don't think it's so difficult. Ki karov elecha davar me'od beficha u'bevcha la'asoto. It's very easy. It's very accessible for you. Lo b'shamayim, it's not in the sky that you have to reach out, climb to heaven to be able to get it. No, it's accessible. You can read it. Go take a book. You know, in the olden days, if we wanted to learn something, read something, we went to a library. The libraries are still around, but today people have an entire library on the internet. Tremendous sources of information. There's a lot of garbage too. Be careful with that. But there's a lot of good, valuable information. As long as you know where to go, that the sources are good sources, there's a wealth of information. It's close to you. It's accessible now even much more than before. So therefore, since everything is accessible, there's no reason to despair, to lose hope, to think, that's it, I don't have a chance, I'm too old for this, it's too difficult for me. No, you can do it on your own. Even though sometimes, of course, a teacher is very helpful, somebody to guide you, there's a lot that we can do on our own. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu, you will notice in this parasha, uses the term chiskuvim tzu a lot. Be courageous, be strong, don't give up hope. Because people tend to sometimes lose hope, thinking that this is too difficult for them. And Moshe says, no, it's not difficult. I'm reminding you, I'm reassuring you that this is accessible for everyone. He's referring to the Torah. I think a good place to start as an example of what Moshe Rabbeinu is talking about, that everyone has great potential and he may not even know it, is with Rabbi Akiva, the famous Rabbi Akiva, great rabbi, who had thousands upon thousands of students. One of the leaders of the generation. He was a great man. He started off not knowing anything about Torah. Until the age of 40, It was only when he was 40 that he started learning the basics. How did it begin? Well, first of all, his wife very much believed in him and encouraged him. It helps to have a wife that believes in you. It pushed him, motivated him. He wasn't so sure that he can handle this. So she gets, of course, a lot of credit. But there's also an incident that's recorded where Rabbi Akiva was sitting next to a rock, a big rock, and there was some water dripping on the rock. And he noticed something unusual, that there was a hole in this very solid rock. And he was able to see that the hole was fashioned out through the continuous drip of water. Even though the water was soft, water is soft, but through the continuous drip, it made a hole. As there is a saying in Latin, "Guta cauat lapidem, non viset sai peccadendo." A drop of water can perforate a stone, not through its sheer pressure, through its sheer force, but through its continuous fall. Continuous fall over the surface of the rock, it will perforate a solid rock. So Rabbi Akiva says, wow, this is a very valuable lesson to me, even though this is a rock. You know, his head, so many years have passed by, he's already 40. For the Torah to penetrate this rock, it's going to be difficult. But apparently, if we give it time, it will happen. With time, water can perforate solid rock. However, I believe that he was also able to learn the following lessons. That if you want to succeed, you have to take small steps. As the rabbis tell us, tafasta merubeh lo tafasta. If you grab everything, you want to learn everything, you want to know everything at once, you will give up very, very quickly. Don't do that. A little bit at a time. Just like with the water here. Look what the water did, but with a lot of time. It succeeded in perforating the rock. So don't grab everything. Start slowly. And eventually, you will be able to acquire a lot. Rabbi Akiva was also thinking, I'm sure, about the past. 40 years I wasted my time. What a waste of a life. Don't think about the past. As they say in Arabic, il lefat met. What is gone, is dead. Forget about it. Yes, okay. It's possible that you could have done certain things. Don't focus on that. Focus now on the future, on the time that you have left, how much there's yet to accomplish. People don't know how long they're going to live. It may not be a lot. Focus right away on whatever it is that you can manage now. At least now you have some awareness of the emet, of the truth. So do whatever you can now. If you focus on the future, there's a chance that you will be able to accomplish something. If you think only about the past, it will disturb you greatly. Another idea that I would want to add that applies sometimes to certain people is that they think of themselves as big sinners. They say, me, doing teshuvah, repenting? How could I? Rasha. In other words, I've done so many terrible things that perhaps they are thinking of themselves like a wicked person, full of sins. Don't think of yourself ever as a Rasha. Person could have been a Rasha a moment ago, but after he's done sincere teshuvah, Hashem embraces him. He says, I love you, I accept you, I welcome you, I will help you, I will clean you, I will forgive you. That's what teshuvah is all about. As long as it's sincere, as long as, of course, a person applies himself and does what it takes to prove his teshuvah. It's not just, I'm sorry. He demonstrates that he sincerely repented, then Hashem will accept him. So never should a person think, oh, Hashem doesn't like me anymore, that's it, life is ruined, I'm a Rasha. You know, when somebody is locked up in jail for 25 years or more, and he's already in his 60s, he doesn't see any chance of him coming out and going back to a normal life anymore. It's pretty much the end of his life. That's it. unless something happens that the president will pardon him, or if because of good behavior they reduce the time. Otherwise, people may be in jail for a long time. This is not the same. Here, Hashem says, it's okay. I allow you to make a U-turn. I allow you to start all over again. The same day. As long as you agree. As long as you accept. That's the big difference. So it's very unhealthy to think that because a person is a Rasha, or he has done some terrible sins, that there's no way that he can change. Nevertheless, even after all we've said so far, that Moshe encourages everyone and reminds them that they still have a chance, there will always be individuals who will not succeed. They will not succeed to overcome certain hesitations that they have, and for all kinds of reasons. We said it was easy. We said it's possible. Everyone has great potential, but the facts are that not everyone succeeds. So we need to analyze one individual as an example of why they don't succeed. Take someone who, for example, has had a problem with drug addiction for a long time. He finally agreed to go and get help, treatment. And the treatment seemed to help him. So he got back to living a normal life, but eventually he went back to drugs. This happens. Not only with drugs, but with alcohol too. And all kinds of addictions. People sometimes succeed only for a short term, only for a short time. And then they go back. Why? Why did you go back? You recovered. You've completely recovered, right? So I may have told you once before that one of the guys who was always going back and forth said he thought he can get away with it. Just a little drink. Nothing will happen to him. There's all kinds of reasons why people fall. But there are individuals who simply don't believe enough in themselves. I'm not talking so much about the guy who tries to get away with it. There are simply some who don't believe that they can do it. And therefore, since they don't believe enough that they will be successful, they fall back and they never progress. You have to believe that Hashem will help you if you help yourself. Otherwise, if you don't believe that this is a possibility, then obviously it's going to be very, very difficult. The Torah is reminding us in this Parasha that Hashem will help you. Hashem believes in you. He's telling you you have tremendous potential. The ones that have the most difficulties, however, staying on the right path, are the Baalei Teshuvah. In other words, even though they have succeeded to come back and to change their lifestyle and to be completely observant, 180 degrees turn, they will have difficulties or challenges for a completely different reason. We must never forget that when we want to do the right thing, our greatest enemy number one, is the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. 24/7, until the day we leave this world, he's always after us. He wants to take us down. The evil inclination, Yetzer Hara. And who is the biggest prize that he can get? He wants his customers back. Who are his customers? The ones that were sinners and are now Baalei Teshuvah. I want my customers. I want them back. He's going to go after them very, very hard. And the problems that will present themselves for Baalei Teshuvah include peer pressure. What happened to you? You're so religious? Are you crazy? Are you a fanatic, an extremist? This could be in the family, this could be friends. Peer pressure. Some people have a hard time with it. You have to be very, very strong. I'm going to share with you, however, an incredible story that happened in Israel quite a few years ago. There was a soccer player who decided one day that he's going to do teshuvah. He says, I'm not going to play on Shabbat. Okay, he's going to continue to play, but not on Shabbat. And he was a pretty good soccer player. He was making good money. And they told him that it won't work out. Many of our games are on Shabbat, so you have to decide what you want. You can't not work on Shabbat. You have to play on Shabbat. We need you. We'll raise your salary. Perhaps this will help you make the decision. No, money doesn't talk to me. I want to observe Shabbat. Shabbat is what's important to me. So, what do? He says, listen, I'm going to finish my contract with you. Maybe, I think, 2-3 months to go. And after that, I'm sorry, but I'm leaving. What happened in those 2-3 months is that he became very famous. All of a sudden, goal after goal. He's a soccer player. Can you imagine? All of a sudden, many goals. He's becoming famous. Everybody wants him to continue to play. This is great. His team is winning. And his manager told him, oh no, you can't leave now. Now we want you more than ever. You become a very valuable player to us. But I'm sorry, I already made up my mind. I made a decision. I'm leaving. I'm not going to play on Shabbat. So imagine what's going on here. He's making goals. He's so valuable that they're willing now to quadruple his salary. Pay him a lot more than he ever dreamed he would get. And he said, I'm sorry. I'm going to keep Shabbat. I'm going to observe Shabbat. I'm not going to play on Shabbat. I'm not going to change my mind for any money. So they let him go. He left soccer. So now he has a problem. He needs to get a job. So he goes to the ministry in Israel of employment, and they tell him, I'm sorry, we don't have too many openings for you except for one, to be a gardener. To be a gardener? Yes. Where? At the same stadium where you used to play. So imagine now the shame that he has to go through being a gardener at the stadium where everybody recognized him as one of the top players, and now he's mowing the lawn and planting flowers. He didn't care. Even though everybody told him you're crazy. He had many fights with his family. But at the end he stood strong, and he didn't let that in any way change his mind. I gave you just a quick story of one individual. There are many who go through tremendous challenges as a result of their teshuvah. They're contemplating doing serious teshuvah, which means a big change in their lifestyle. Moshe therefore reminds such individuals, Lo yarpecha velo yazveka, Hashem will not abandon you. He will not let go of you. He will be at your side. There's no reason for you to fear. Challenges there will be. The evil inclination will go after you with a vengeance, because you were his customer. You were a good customer until now. But don't let go. Don't give up. One of the, I think, most beautiful pesukim that can help about teshuvah in the face of all these challenges, it says as follows: Ora chaim lema'ala lamaskil. The path to life for those who are maskilim, who are intelligent, is lema'ala, is upstairs. What does that mean? In order for one to stay on the right track, the path of life, he always has to aspire lema'ala. Always, lema'ala, lema'ala. Always become better. Always do more. Always try to improve whatever you can. Never stay the same. If you continuously aspire and you have this ambition of lema'ala, then you will succeed to overcome all the difficulties and challenges, because you know where you have to get to. You know where you have to, what you have to accomplish. So remember, Orachayim lamaskil, those who are maskilim, those who are intelligent, who pay attention to what's really important in life, and it's not money. Lemala, just aim to get as high as you can. As high as you can, even though you may not reach the top, but at least halfways. If you would not have thought of the top, you would not even have gotten halfways. So always think as far as you can. Lemala. However, even though this is good advice, we're told, as I said, mentioned before, be careful not to overdo it. One step at a time. And that is perhaps also insinuated in the words attain Nitzavim hayom. Hayom, today? Yes, every day is separate. Take one day at a time. Take the achievement of one day, and don't think about, oh, I need to achieve this in the coming year. Even though that's nice, that you have a plan, and it's good to plan, but be realistic. Focus on one day at a time. You can't predict what will be tomorrow. You may have very good intentions, but not everything is under your control. And you might be disappointed. Things will not work out the way you want. Will you be strong enough to handle that? Focus on one day at a time. It is much more manageable than to try to take on an entire year. All right, so we've been talking a little bit about teshuvah, about people changing their lifestyle. There's no doubt that those changes are more difficult in the senior years. If a person is already in his 60s, 70s, he may think it's too difficult now. Even though it's more difficult than when he was younger, it's never impossible. But because this is a fact that it does become a little bit more difficult, the Torah introduces to us in Parashat Vayelech a very interesting mitzvah. The mitzvah of Hakhel. Hakhel is a mitzvah that applied once every 7 years after the Shemitah, after the sabbatical. The Chag HaSukkot, on the holiday of Sukkot, they would all gather, men, women, and children, in Yerushalayim. Remember, you have 3 times a year going up to Jerusalem? Yeah? This time, it's everyone, not just the men. Usually it's the men. Men, women, and children, even infants, the youngest. So why do they all need to come? Somebody may think, well, they didn't have babysitters in those days. No, that's not the reason. It's very important to gather everyone to hear the words of the Torah that will be spoken in the Bet HaMikdash, in the temple. The most powerful lesson, perhaps, that this mitzvah conveys is, look, children are going to hear Torah. Even though they're infants, they need to hear these words of the Torah. They need to absorb this Torah. It's important that children get as much as they can from the Torah early on. Because yes, later on, it is more difficult. So what's the lesson here? Give them whatever you can while they're still young. Yes, Jewish education is expensive. Yes, but it's worth it. Give them whatever you can, implant it in them when they're still young, because that will serve them in their later years. Our history is full of stories where mothers sold their jewelry in order to provide Jewish education for their children. I'm going to share with you one incredible story that took place a couple hundred years ago with the Ritvaz, great rabbi, a leader in his time, who in his later years was a little weaker. What can we do? As we get older, we're weaker. And one day, when he was in the synagogue, people noticed him that he was a little bit crying. And they knew that this is because of the yortzeit of his father. This was the anniversary of the death of his father. And even though the rabbi's father had died already 50 years ago, and even though he died at the age of 80, this rabbi for some reason was crying. So they went over to him, Rabbi, is everything okay? Why are you crying? I realize it's the yortzeit, but it happened a long time ago. So let me tell you what happened this morning. As I was getting ready to go to the synagogue, I realized that it was cold outside. And I am a little older now, and I felt maybe I should not go to the synagogue and pray at home instead. I don't want to catch a cold. He's an older person now, so he was afraid for his health. But as soon as I thought of that, I recalled something of my past when I was a child, something that left such an imprint in me that I immediately changed my mind and came right away to shul. He says, when I was a young boy, I was very gifted, he says. My parents very much wanted to give me the best teacher, but a good teacher costs money. So my father used to build ovens. In those days, the oven served as a kitchen oven, as well as to heat up the house, which was very important in Eastern Europe. It was very cold winters. But for a few months, my father did not have an income. There were no orders. So even though he hired for me the best teacher, he couldn't pay him. And several months went by without paying my teacher. And the teacher told my parents that, listen, if you don't come up with some money, I cannot continue to teach your son. And my parents, of course, were not going to hear this. And they thought of a plan. The father that morning had heard in the synagogue that there was a very wealthy individual who was building a home for his son. And he wanted to hire someone to do so, but there were not enough bricks in the neighborhood. And therefore he offered a nice amount, 6 rubles, a very nice amount, to whoever can assemble an oven for his son. Can bring the bricks and assemble the oven. He will pay him a nice amount of 6 rubles, which would last for a few months for any family. 6 rubles was a lot of money. So this man, the rabbi's father, heard this, told his wife, you know what, I'm going to disassemble our oven so I can provide him with the bricks and build him an oven so we can pay for our son's education. That winter, the rabbi is telling them the story, we all were very, very cold. But my parents didn't mind, because what was important to them was that their child was getting the best education possible. Imagine the sacrifice that they were prepared for Jewish education. So when I was hesitating because of a little bit of cold outside not to go, I reminded myself, look what my parents were prepared to do. And here I'm hesitating because of a little bit of cold. That is why I began to cry. Look at this great self-sacrifice of the previous generation. So there's no doubt that whatever we give a child in his early years will remain with him. What that means is that even though he may let go of it, a lot of children let go. We said before there are people that let go of it, but because it's implanted there, one of these days, later on, it may come back. So don't give up your hope on him, even though you're seeing that he's not exactly doing what he's supposed to. You've done so much for him, you've implanted it in him. Yes, even though he's letting go of it now, he's interested in all kinds of silly things, like many teenagers are. At some point in his life, he's going to catch up, because it's already implanted in him. And that is the meaning that Shlomo Melech tells us in Mishlei, Chanoch lanar al pi darko gam ki yaskir lo yasur mimenu. Teach a child, the simple literal meaning of that verse is, teach a child according to his pace, according to his way. When he grows old, he will not depart from it. In other words, try to give the child, try to direct him according to his ways, according to his pace, according to his abilities. Don't overburden him with too much. Every child is different. Teach him according to his way, according to his abilities, according to his level. And you will see that that will serve him very well into his later years. It will stay with him. The deeper meaning, however, is give him what you can when he's a nar, when he's a young boy, so that when he will be a zaken, gam ki yaskin, in his later years, some of what you've given him then will remain with him. It will not leave him. It's already implanted there early on. Just want to spend a couple minutes on a group that will be very, very distant from Judaism in the end of days. And the concern here is what will be of them. How will they ever find out? How will they discover their roots? Who will bring them back? We've been talking a little bit about those who were Jewish, were observant, and became weak. They eventually can come back. Those that didn't have the proper Jewish education, somehow they will come back too. They will discover it. But what about those that are very, very distant? How will they ever come back? The Torah addresses this as well. Hashem says, "Im yeni dachacha b'kitzei hashamayim." If it ever happens that one of you is so distant, at the edge of the shamayim, at the edge of the sky, in other words, very, very far away, totally removed, Misham mikabetz Hashem. Hashem says, you will see there will come a time I will bring him home too. I will gather them all. I will call out to everyone. I will give everyone a chance. It's not their fault. So even though it's true that there will be a lot of individuals, unfortunately, especially in the end of days, that will be very, very distant, there's a certain promise here that many of them at least will be given the opportunity to return. There was an individual, I think it was in Germany, who was very, very far. He didn't believe in that anymore. He didn't practice anything. Not even Yom Kippur. Imagine, there's a lot of Jews that at least one day a year, Yom Kippur, they go to the synagogue. This guy was completely secular. I think even an atheist. Very, very far. He was walking in the street towards the end of Yom Kippur. You know what happens at the end of the day of Yom Kippur? There's a shofar that's blown. Rosh Hashanah we blow the shofar, but at the end of Yom Kippur the shofar is also blown. It's the end of the day, when the gates of the shofar are closed. One more shofar is blown. So that's what he heard. He heard the shofar being blown for one last time. And that shook him up. All of a sudden he began to cry. All of a sudden he somehow began to realize how far he has gone. And this is so important to him. This is part of his heritage. Somehow that shofar is what opened him up to return back to his people. And this is something that has happened with many in various ways. And the Kabbalah explains that this is the heavenly voice, the Bat Kol, that is reaching out in all generations, calling out, Shuvu Banim, return my children. There is such a heavenly voice that is not very audible to us, but somehow the soul, the neshama, does hear it. And that explains why all of a sudden they feel an urge to come back, even though nobody even spoke to them. They on their own. The question, however, is, why do we need someone to awaken them? We talked about those individuals that on their own, they somehow figure things out. But there are those who are very far away that need to be awakened. And who does the awakening? Hashem. Because Hashem said, I will do this to those who are completely removed. Why do they need to be awakened? Can't they figure this out on their own? Isn't there something that they can do that will bring them to their senses? Hashem has to help them. So the Kabbalah explains that when people sin, especially sins, people who commit a lot of sins, the sins, molidot achazariyut, they bring about a certain cruelty, that the individual becomes a little bit more indifferent about certain things that he should be sensitive about. And this cruelty somehow takes away his interest in life. Not that he's not interested, not that he all of a sudden is not interested in living, but it somehow cools him off to the excitement that a healthy human being would have towards living a productive life. Sins, I'm talking about somebody who committed a lot of sins, not just somebody who's not observant. So as a result of many sins, sometimes this cruelty overtakes him and he no longer has that desire, that interest to return, to observe the mitzvot. No interest whatsoever in that. And the reason for that, the Kabbalah explains, is because he has no pity on himself. That cruelty in him makes it so that he doesn't even have any pity on himself. He doesn't care. He has this attitude, I don't care. You may have heard this from people. How could somebody say they don't care? They're somehow disconnected. All they're doing is existing, as we said in the very beginning, but not living a purposeful life. So in order to get themselves into that mode of thinking, purposeful life, they need to somehow have pity for themselves and care about life, which they don't have. So what does Hashem do? Hashem machdir lahem. He somehow injects into them rachmanut. Rachamim is one of the attributes of Hashem, so he injects into them a little bit this attribute of compassion. Have some compassion on yourself. And this is as a result of the neshama, as a result of the soul that we have, that all of a sudden feels a certain compassion. And that compassion brings out the ratzon, the will to live a purposeful life, that is. All of a sudden they feel, wow, what I've been doing is not really living. It's without any purpose whatsoever. It makes no sense, it's so empty. All of a sudden, why do you care? All of a sudden, because of that compassion, that pity that he has on himself, which is coming from the soul, which is coming from Hashem, that injected it into him. Just to end, I want to remind you that we're living in very, very special times now. because this is a time that we see all the prophecies coming true, that there will be a tremendous movement, a tremendous awakening of people doing teshuvah, people coming back. And I can say that I've seen this in every continent. It's true in the United States, it's true in South America, it's true in Israel, it's true in Europe, everywhere. Even non-Jews are somehow coming back, many of them, in searching for God, searching for meaning in life. So this is the time that we're living in, that Hashem made this promise, that even though some of my kids have been so far removed from me, as a result of the diaspora, as a result of the persecutions, much of course is not their fault. In my compassion for them, I will bring them home. So this is something that of course is happening as we're speaking, and there are many situations where people can see this in their own families, that people are returning, that people want to make a change. It's an incredible thing to see. It's a beautiful thing to see. And anyone that we know that is pursuing that path, it's a big mitzvah to help him, and to encourage him, and to show him the way. It's a tremendous mitzvah. This is, I believe, the biggest mitzvah of the generation, the biggest one. Helping another Jew come home, helping anyone we can with encouraging them, because they will be facing many challenges. But this is an exciting time, because this is an indication, this is proof that Mashiach is coming, and that B'ezrat Hashem will bring us all back home very soon.